My name is Allison Parker. I've always been the responsible one in the family, the dependable aunt, the one everyone calls when they need help, advice, or a place to stay. I live alone in a cozy home in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. My only daughter left for college last year, and since then, the house has felt a little too quiet. Last Saturday was no different. Quiet, slow, and peaceful. I was curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, sipping on hot tea while watching one of those crime documentaries I always found so captivating. Around 7 p.m. my phone buzzed. It was a message from my sister, Melanie. "Allison, would it be okay if Ryan stops by for a few hours tonight? He's in your area for a study group and doesn't want to drive back too late. He just needs a place to crash for the night." Ryan is my 19-year-old nephew, Melanie's son. He's a college sophomore, polite, smart, and always respectful. I hadn't seen him in a while, so the idea of some company, even if brief, sounded like a nice break from my routine. I quickly texted back, "Of course. Tell him to come over whenever he's done." Around 9:15 p.m., I heard a soft knock at the door. I opened it to see Ryan standing there. His backpack slung over one shoulder and his hoodie damp from the light Portland drizzle. He gave me a sheepish smile. "Hey, Aunt Allison. Sorry it's a bit late." "Don't be silly," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "You're always welcome here." He kicked off his shoes and looked around. "This place hasn't changed a bit." I laughed. "Well, why fix what isn't broken?" We chatted for a while in the kitchen. I made him some hot cocoa, and he filled me in on his classes, how tough his engineering major was, and how he missed home-cooked meals. It was such a comfort, just talking to someone who wasn't through a screen. His energy was warm and familiar, reminding me of when he was a little boy who used to follow my daughter around, asking endless questions. At one point he noticed the photos on the wall. One was of his mom and me when we were teenagers. "Wow," he said, pointing to it. "You look just like my mom back then." I grinned. "We were practically twins growing up. You should have seen the trouble we got into." He chuckled and sat down at the kitchen island. "You know, you're way cooler than I thought you'd be." "Gee, thanks," I said, raising an eyebrow. "No, seriously. Most people my age would think staying at their aunt's house would be boring, but this is nice. It's calm here." Something about the way he said it made me pause. It was more than just politeness, it was sincerity. Maybe he didn't get much calm in his life. Maybe college was harder than he let on. I didn't pry, but I did offer. "If you ever need to get away for a bit, you can always come here. This house has a spare room and too many leftovers." He smiled at me in a way that felt deeper than gratitude. "I might take you up on that." By 11:30, I showed him to the guest room and handed him some extra blankets. "Let me know if you need anything." "Thanks, Aunt Allison." "Really?" I went to my own room, changed into my pajamas and tried to sleep, but for some reason I couldn't. The house didn't feel as quiet as before. I heard the faint sounds of movement from the guest room. At first I figured he was just settling in, but it continued. Soft footsteps, maybe pacing. I walked down the hallway and knocked lightly. "Ryan, you okay?" The door creaked open and he looked surprised, standing there shirtless in athletic shorts. His hair slightly messy. "Yeah, sorry. I couldn't sleep." He nodded. "Me neither. Want to watch a movie or something? Might help." We ended up in the living room again, both of us wrapped in our own blankets. I picked a light comedy this time. As the movie played, we talked again, this time about things he never mentioned before. His struggles in school, pressure from his dad, and how sometimes he felt like he wasn't good enough. "You ever feel like you're just existing for other people's expectations?" he asked quietly. "All the time," I said, surprised at how naturally honest I felt around him. "But I've learned to start living for myself. Took me long enough." He looked at me, really looked at me like he was trying to memorize what I said. Eventually we dozed off on the couch. When I woke up, the sun was just starting to rise. Ryan had fallen asleep leaning on the other armrest, his face peaceful, one hand resting loosely over his stomach. I tiptoed to the kitchen to make breakfast. When he finally stirred and walked in, he looked groggy but smiled. "Smells good in here. I made your favorite pancakes and eggs." We ate together and it felt like a Sunday morning with family, like something simple and beautiful. After he cleaned up and packed his bag, he lingered near the door. "Thank you again, Aunt Allison." "Any time," I said. "You sure you don't want to stay another night?" He hesitated. I would, but I don't want to impose." "You're never an imposition." He gave me a warm hug. Not a quick one, but a real, full hug that lingered. When he finally pulled away, he looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. That day stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, Ryan began visiting more often. At first, it was under the pretense of being in the area or studying nearby. But I knew better. He was seeking something: comfort, calm, connection. One night, after a particularly rough day at work, I came home to find him already there. He had used the spare key I gave him, just in case. "I made dinner," he said, holding up a spatula. I couldn't help but laugh. "You're really making yourself at home. Is that okay?" It was more than okay. Dinner turned into talking. Talking turned into late-night TV. And eventually those visits became routine. Each time, the line between aunt and nephew blurred. Not inappropriately, but emotionally. We weren't just family, we became each other's sanctuary. Place to feel heard, valued, safe. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the stars, he said, "You know, I don't think I've ever felt this scene before. Like, truly." I looked at him, and for a moment I saw not my sister's son, not a teenager anymore, but a young man carrying a heavy heart. "You're not alone, Ryan. And you never have to be. Not with me." He nodded and reached for my hand. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't inappropriate. It was human. It was connection. That night he stayed late again. And again. And again. Each time I could have said no. But I didn't. Because sometimes the universe brings two people together. Not for romance, not for drama, but for healing. And for that, I'll always be grateful.